Intrigued by Rowan Atkinson.
Yeah, he's my favourite.
He is
Mr. Bean. I always forget how he sounds like, because always when you're watching him in Mr. Bean, he's just mumbling.
Doesn't say anything really, man.
But now he's used his voice to attack cancel culture for comedians.
Vehicles. The sale of EVs in the UK has slowed down so much the government has halved its sales forecasts. Now, the government had planned that by 2027...
So Rowan Atkinson's stance on freedom of expression focuses on defending the right to express one's opinion without excessive restrictions. For him, freedom of expression is fundamental to a healthy society, and its restriction can have serious consequences, limiting not only humor and art, but also public dialogue. Throughout his career, he has warned about how certain laws can be interpreted ambiguously, allowing harmless comments to be punished, which he considers a dangerous trend. Atkinson has given specific examples that show how absurd the application of these laws can be. One of his most frequently cited cases is that of the man arrested for calling a police horse gay, an example that highlights what he sees as an overuse of censorship in trivial situations. For him, these incidents reflect how censorship laws can expand to the point of being disproportionate, affecting common sense, and generating a climate of fear towards expression. In his opinion, these laws, instead of protecting the vulnerable, end up oppressing those who do not have a strong voice in society. Atkinson argues that this disproportionate censorship, while it may have good intentions, limits the diversity of opinion and especially affects those who do not have a public platform or means to defend themselves. Her activism was clearly reflected in the campaign to reform Section 5 of the UK Public Order Act. This law, which allowed people to be arrested for insulting comments, symbolizes for him the kind of legislation that threatens freedom of expression by leaving too much room for subjective interpretation. Atkinson argued that merely offensive comments should not be considered a crime, as they allow the flow of ideas in an open society. The message it seeks to convey is clear. Democratic societies need to guarantee the right to express opinions and debate freely, even when opinions are unpopular or controversial. For him, allowing authorities to define what is offensive without a clear rule can lead to an abuse of power and a state of surveillance in public expression. Atkinson also mentions how this new bigotry uses the protection of political correctness to silence critical discourse. From his perspective, it is not real tolerance. Instead, it replaces one form of repression with another. It expresses concern about how this censorship affects society at large, promoting a culture where only opinions that do not challenge the dominant narrative are accepted.
Because of the undoubtedly privileged position that is afforded to those of a high public profile. So my concerns are less for myself and more for those more vulnerable because of their lower profile.
Also, the right of ordinary citizens to express themselves without fear of reprisals. For Atkinson, protecting freedom of expression, even in provocative or ironic comments, is key to maintaining a democratic balance and avoiding a society that eliminates diversity of thought in the name of protection. In his position, Atkinson argues that allowing ambiguous laws to restrict public expression represents a setback in respect for civil rights. He believes that we must rethink the role of censorship and prevent protection tools from becoming mechanisms of repression that restrict debate and the free exchange of ideas. In the end, Atkinson's argument boils down to a fundamental defense of free speech, even when opinions are uncomfortable. For him, it is necessary that the right to express an opinion, criticize and debate stand firm in the face of any attempt to limit it, since it is a cornerstone of any democratic society that seeks progress and understanding. Atkinson also emphasizes that this censorship can especially affect those who hold minority or unconventional views. As laws become more restrictive, people who question the established narrative may be silenced, which he sees as a risk to diversity of thought. In his opinion, allowing the expression of controversial ideas, even if some may be offensive, is crucial for a society to maintain a critical and open identity. In addition, it states that excessive censorship not only limits those who are arrested for their comments, but also sends a message to society in general. Expressing one's opinion freely can have consequences. This generates a deterrent effect on public expression, leading to self-censorship where people avoid discussing sensitive topics for fear of being misunderstood or punished. According to Atkinson, this climate of fear contradicts the principles of a strong democracy where everyone should feel safe to express their ideas. Another aspect that Atkinson highlights is the role of technology in modern censorship. With the rise of social media, opinions can be quickly monitored and censored, increasing the pressure on freedom of expression. Atkinson points out that if boundaries are not clearly defined, online censorship can lead to an era of mass surveillance, in which platforms and governments decide what content is acceptable or not. This, for him, represents an urgent challenge that society must address.
Keir set out to drag the Labour Party back to the centre when he became leader.
It is the honour and the privilege of my life to be elected as leader of the Labour Party.
For Atkinson, it is critical that society understands the difference between protecting the vulnerable and restricting freedom of expression unnecessarily. He argues that the fact that someone is offended by a comment should not be sufficient grounds to consider that comment as a crime. Defending this distinction, he argues, is key to ensuring that freedom of expression is maintained as a protected right and not as a privilege restricted by the interests or sensitivities of certain groups. Atkinson also criticizes what he calls the outrage industry, a phenomenon in which certain groups amplify minor offenses to promote censorship on controversial issues. He believes that this industry fosters a culture of cancellation and censorship that goes against democratic principles. For him, this tendency turns debate into a tool for suppressing opinions rather than an opportunity to discuss ideas openly and respectfully. According to Atkinson, one of the big problems with this censorship is that it ends up affecting ordinary people more than public figures. Although he himself has a platform to defend himself from criticism or misunderstandings, he mentions that many people do not enjoy that protection. By limiting the speech of ordinary people, those without public visibility are left vulnerable to the decisions of those who have the power to interpret the law according to their own criteria. Atkinson argues that this situation generates a polarized society where people feel alienated and afraid to engage in open conversations. When the right to dissent is perceived as a risk, society loses momentum towards change and progress. For him, it is essential that the public debate remains open, without fear of legal or social reprisals, since only in this way is real progress possible on political, social, and cultural issues. Atkinson's stance reflects a concern for the balance between protection and freedom. He acknowledges that there is offensive or harmful speech, but believes that it is possible to address it without sacrificing freedom of expression in its entirety. In his view, a society that allows for open criticism and public debate is strengthened by accepting its own diversity rather than trying to suppress it. Ultimately, Atkinson presents a vision of a democratic society where ideas, even those that make them uncomfortable, are debated without fear of reprisals. He sees this openness as the foundation for a strong and diverse culture, where citizens can be critical, creative, and engaged without fear of being silenced.
To attract media attention. Even for those actions that were withdrawn, people were arrested, questioned, taken to court, and then released. That isn't a law working properly.
Rowan Atkinson emphasizes that freedom of expression is crucial for a healthy society, as it allows for open debate and challenges to authority. He argues that laws curtailing speech often start with good intentions,